Some say that you should never talk to your exes, that you should just cut them out of your life. I adamantly disagree and think that depends deeply upon how good you are at one thing. What is that one thing? It's conflict resolution. And today, I have a special treat for you. I'm bringing on a ex of mine from almost 10 years ago, Miss Lori Painter, who is now a coach, transformational coach for women, helping them to heal, resolve the conflicts in their own life, and get what they want in love and in life. And we have a powerful discussion about some of the strategies and the meaningfulness behind conflict resolution. So if you're someone who wants to manifest more in your life, you want to approach relationships in a way that's healthy and aligned with you, where you can feel secure and grounded, then you're going to love today's episode, and I can't wait to share. See you inside. Miss Lori Painter, how are you doing?
I'm great.
So before we got on camera, we were having a conversation, and when we were talking on the phone before getting on this call, we both thought a great subject matter to deal with would be the importance of conflict resolution and the role that that specifically plays within our own selves, so that we feel secure as a person, so that when we show up in relationships, honestly, whether those be romantic, friendship, business relationships, that we feel secure, and therefore our behaviors and our actions are coming from a secure place, and as opposed to codependency, neediness, fear-based, reactions, all the things that show up in a relationship. And also that when those do inevitably, because none of us are perfect, when those come up in a relationship, that we're equipped with some of the some tools, and we both have learned, some together and some on our own. And full disclosure to everyone watching, you and I were in a relationship like 9 years ago at this point, and we went through our own journey of triggering each other and reaching out for tools and learning, and that actually helped us to heal. And when it was time to consciously go different directions, it really did so much to alleviate a lot of the pain and suffering we often associate with breakups. It made it much more palatable and meaningful, and we're still able to be friends and colleagues in a lot of ways in life to this point. So with that, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit about what you do, and just a little bit of your background and how you've arrived to where you're at now working with women.
Well, I'll start with, first and foremost, yes, I think the conflict between you and I and the growth that we had, it says a lot to be still friendly, still connected in the ways that we are. So it wasn't like a one and done conversation. It was an evolution, of closer and closer and closer and more healing. But I grew up in a home that had fighting every day. It was just normal, someone screaming and yelling. And I never saw mom and dad sit down. What is it that you want and need? How can I support you? There was no resolution. It was anger, blame, resentment, and pointing back and forth, and then just both going their separate ways. And so, funny enough, I just was this is crazy, but this is just life. When you're young, you just think this is wild, but it just is how it was. So as I was going through my life, I realized I didn't have healthy conflict resolution skills. I didn't know how to move through things. And that was always such a big challenge for me, is how can I resolve things? And I would say that's been probably one of the biggest things for me to find the most empowering, is one, how to resolve things within myself, independent of if I'm able to reach a resolution with anybody else. And then if possible, can I reach a resolution with somebody else? And can I do it without the loop of getting stuck in the finger pointing? And can I do this So it has been a long, long journey to get to this place. But I mean, I'll just say this, it was so important to me that I'm grateful to now be here. So now a lot of the work that I do is I do work with women that don't know how to handle conflicts within themselves and in their relationships. And as a result, when you are conflicted, you can't have a peace in the body. You can't have peaceful relationships, and it does show up and it affects your relationship. So this is something that if you don't learn to master the ability to resolve that process, it's going to hold you back. And it's been that way for me, and it's been that way for clients. So now it's just such a joy to be able to watch women step into a more secure and clear, coherent place within themselves so that they can express that outwardly. And I definitely recommend, I say, don't even think about having a conversation with anyone else until you are fully complete and resolved yourself. And then maybe you can have a conversation, but it might not even be necessary. Sometimes when you resolve it within yourself, that was probably the only thing that needed to be resolved.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've noticed, I can think back on our relationship, and thinking back on myself, and the sure sign of whenever you have an unresolved conflict is a high level of reactivity around a certain subject or thing. And then you have racing thoughts or ideas that coalesce around that sensation or fear. It's really a sensation in the body you get. It's like a trauma response of fear. It's like, it's a message that, oh no, I can't really navigate or survive. I don't feel safe or secure. And so we get highly reactive. So that's a sure telltale sign. So some of the funny ways I remember we would, it's funny now, right? That we would trigger each other would be like, I think I would trigger you whenever you were triggered, and then I would be avoidant and you would be anxious, right? So me taking distance felt like what I needed, and it would lead to you feeling like that was like abandonment. So I'm feeling betrayed and you're feeling abandoned. And it's all because of unresolved conflicts within ourselves. And it was so funny because once we, our journey was reading Dr. Patricia Allen's, or it was more than that, but I'd say a big milestone or a big catalyst in that transformation was studying Dr. Patricia Allen's work and reading her book, Getting to I Do. And for me, I'd done some work on the male, like with David Data, Eben Pagan, and various other sources. But it was funny because when we got through that book, we actually learned how to communicate with each other from a masculine frame in a way that I wasn't threatened or feeling betrayed just because you had an emotion or feeling, and you might have a story around it, but I was able to see the emotion under it instead of just me getting triggered by your story, which I knew was like, to me would feel like a false accusation or a misunderstanding. And so my feeling of being misunderstood put me in my feminine, and then I'm highly reactive while you're trying to express your feelings. So I learned to ground myself in the truth that you're just having an emotional experience, and to listen beyond the story. And then you also simultaneously were learning to communicate from a place of feeling versus the story itself. And so I remember us both like practicing, and it was really the key that unlocked it was the communication. And what she was teaching in that book really is, she calls it empowered communication. But it's really another way to look at it. It's a strategy for effective conflict resolution, in particular between masculine energy and the feminine. And that was a real game changer for me, and has helped me so much, since then.
Yeah, actually, her work was fantastic. And even further, there was a book that I went through her program. She was the author of the book, Hold Me Tight. And it was about intimacy with couples and how how we can bring in intimacy through our conflicts, how it actually, if done correctly, the end result is a tighter, closer bond. And I remember I set a goal, I was like, okay, I'm going to go through this and I'm going to become so crystal clear and so resolved within myself that I could handle a conflict in 4 sentences. That was my goal. And I remember I was like, okay, that required so much clarity to be able to sit there and go, okay, what am I thinking? What am I believing? What am I feeling? And what is this reminding me of? And seeing the illusion of it. And what is it that I need to feel better? And when I could identify those, it was just so liberating, but that was like going to the gym. Like, how can I become emotionally resilient? Because when you are in we'll just talk like a hypervigilant state, like I obviously was diagnosed with complex PTSD. So this high wired thing was a normal thing. It was like, you were always on high alert. You were always like, when's something going to happen? So to learn how to like, okay, how can I breathe? How can I bring myself down into a healthy brain state so that I can actually slow down my thoughts enough to understand what is happening? Because right now I'm being chased by the lion. I cannot have a coherent conversation with you in this moment. Yeah. But then in that ability to learn how to regulate myself and then to ask myself the questions, what is the meaning? What is the belief? And if any, and also just really taking responsibility for what I'm choosing to believe. What meaning am I giving this to? And does this diminish me or take away? And that's what I find is that oftentimes conflicts with anybody is that we have attached some sort of this is a threat. This is diminishing me in some particular way. And we want to, in the traditional form, it's like we're either trying to pull in or, protect and push away. And, we talked about attachment styles of anxious and avoidant. And actually what I learned through the complex PTSD and all the things that I've gone through is I actually had a disorganized attachment style, or they'll call it a fearful avoidant. And what that is when you're a combination of the both. It's like you want to pull them in and say, give me reassurance. And then you want to push them away because this is too much. This is too intimate. And that is, I would probably say, is probably the most difficult of attachment styles to work with. So, I was just handed a really great platter of opportunities to heal. But I will say that it is totally possible to heal from complex PTSD, from fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment styles and all of this stuff. So, I mean, God, I was like the poster child of the biggest nightmare ever.
So what you're saying is you put me through a lot.
What I'm saying is you chose to put yourself in that situation.
I know. No, it's hilarious.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny when you get on the other side of things that you can just see things as matter of fact without the reactivity. It's that's the evidence of the healing, which is really just a calm nervous system. Really,
right.
Yeah.
I had one relationship, and this was probably the one that then spurred me on to really go and look into Pat Allen's work, was when I remember being in this relationship. I was really happy in the relationship, but it was so good that my nervous system was like, I'm not getting a fix of drama. Like, I'm not getting the fear. I'm not getting the this. So my body was so addicted to it that I literally, not consciously, but subconsciously, was pushing buttons to get this conflict so that it could be resolved, so then we could be closer. And I mean, it's insane. But he would sit me down and he was like, hey, look, like, I've never seen my parents ever do any of this. And he's like, Lori, it is completely possible to go 30, 40, 50 years in a relationship and resolve conflict without all of this stuff. And I remember crying because I never had heard of anybody in my life being able to do that. And I was like, if that could be possible for me, that would be a dream come true. Yeah.
Well, to pivot off that, this ties in perfectly. I was co-facilitating an event the other night. It was a full moon ceremony. We had about 21 people there, and this topic of conflict has been on my mind. Again, I've been listening to a book called Conflict Without Casualties. Another one of those goods. Forget the author's name. He's a PhD. I really recommend it. It's a good one. It's really, really practical stuff. But, conflict is a paradox. I asked the people in the audience, I said, when I say the word conflict, what comes to mind? What are some keywords? And so I let them kind of bounce some, and they're saying, like anger, resentment, war, toxic. And it was all negative connotations. And I said, and so I told him, I was like, I've had the same perception. It says, but if you look at the etymology, the root of the word, it actually means to strike together. There's really not any negative connotations other than ones that we project around it. And the truth is that conflict is an inevitability. And it's if you have, we both share a lot of esoteric beliefs. If you believe that all is one, and that whatever your, concept of God is, that we are all like individuated units of consciousness or slivers of God that are having an individuated experience. And we all have core needs that are irreducible. And then we have strategies for meeting those needs that kind of form our dreams and how we go about life. Well, when inevitably you're going to have different ideas about how to meet needs. And so that creates, you're striking together two different conscious minds. And if you're not secure in yourself, you perceive that as a threat. Okay. And the perception of threat makes you act in a defensive way, which is going to likely get that mirrored back. And then it escalates into drama. And then that plays out in your own life, and then escalate that onto a collective conscious level. And now you have war. So paradoxically, the more skilled you are at conflict, the more peace and harmony you will have in your life.
It's interesting that you say that. It's the intent is not to have conflict. The intent is that it's the refinement, because usually when there's conflict, it means that there's a boundary that's been crossed. And that's just something that you may have not even been aware was even a boundary until you were put in that situation. And when you make those little refinements, then you do find you have a more peaceful relationship. But I do think of conflict resolution as it's just like going to the gym. It's like you being able to get back to peace no matter what comes up in your life within yourself or other people, but that you can bring yourself back to that homeostasis, to where all is well, all is safe and secure, all is, as it's meant to be. You're stronger and better for it. So the conflict is actually a gift if you actually know that. Now, it's a nightmare if you don't know how to get through it. It's it'll run your life. But if you can actually realize, like, wow, this is actually happening for me. This is a refinement. This is bringing me to a more peaceful, coherent state. This is bringing more intimacy. This is more self-awareness. This is it. How could you not? So I'll be really clear. Sometimes I'll say, bring on the conflict for my own understanding of, like, I want to see what triggers me. I want to see what I'm giving power to. Like, I'm choosing to hand my power over to be reactive. I want to see what that is. And why is that? And what is it that I need to resolve within myself? And the more I do that, it's like the faster and more resolved things become. So it's like, I'm not even interested in trying to engage. Like, you can't engage with in a fight with a peaceful person. It's like,
yeah. And again, if we just change our meaning of the word conflict, and it's just two things striking together that have different perceptions, there's an opportunity. It's a law of the universe. Any two things, when you merge them together or have them interact with each other, create a third. Okay, so you get to make a choice. Like, if you're grounded and know what your needs are, one of the secrets to conflict is learning how to clearly communicate your needs. Or like in the four agreements, that would be the part, like, be impeccable with your words, be one of those things. And it's okay to communicate those needs. And we all have areas in our life where when we were children, we have an area where we needed to express a need in our own unique way. And the environment we're in was not conducive to that. And that could have been in a passive way or a very active, say, way where it was traumatic, really like abusive. And that sends a message to the nervous system that me communicating that need equals unsafe. And so you have now these trapped emotions, which which really is a trapped sensation in the body. And then anything that echoes or reminds you reminds the subconscious rather of that experience will trigger that feeling. So this is where I kind of want to shift the conversation into some of the recommendations for the healing work, because I see, you're coaching women. I've been doing a men's mastermind for a year with some of my friends who are, wanted to level up. I wanted to just shift my peer group a little bit and extend an invitation to them. And then I've noticed that there are, some of the patterns I see is that a big one, a huge one, this was a theme the other night, is it comes down to, you mentioned it earlier, is boundaries and the people-pleasing component, where there's just a fear of stating either how you feel or what you want. There's actually shame, guilt, and contracted emotions around that. And we both explored modalities for stepping into that, because you have to revisit or feel those feelings. You can't avoid that internal conflict. Otherwise, you're going to be avoiding the opportunities in your life as well in that area. So what are some things you feel like move the dial the most for you, and that you're now echoing with your clients in that particular area?
Oh, gosh. One thing that I often will frame is, first and foremost, to be vulnerable and to ask to have a need met. If you've been shamed or told you were selfish, you're greedy, who do you think you are? I mean, obviously it's going to create a lot of fear and anxiety to ask for what you need because you've been shamed. So that's understandable. But getting to the point where it's like, okay, so often what we'll do, instead of asking for our needs to be met, we'll complain. Oh, he's just this or she's just that. And it's a complaint. But actually, one of the most simple tools that I find, like, this is just a real quick one that anyone can do, is what am I complaining about? And the opposite of that is the request. So if I'm like, he's interrupting me, and you always interrupt me. That's what you do. You just always interrupt me. And then the opposite is to take a deep breath and say, you know what? I appreciate that you have so much that you want to share. And I want to hear what you have to say. Is it possible that you hear me out completely and not interrupt me so I can do this? Is it possible that you could hear me out fully and completely and please then share? It's instead of saying, but what we'll find in you see it portrayed in media and all over, is that we actually glorify the dysfunctional communication and interaction. It's socially praised. It's in movies, it's in shows, it's on lyrics to songs. And so it's so deeply embedded at us to look outside of ourselves and point the finger at somebody else instead of saying, oh, so I'm just going to complain. And if I complain, that's going to get the need met. And it's like, no, why don't you just think, what is the opposite of that complaint? And can I actually respectfully ask for that to be met, with the understanding that they have every right to accept it or reject it? And that's not your problem. Your problem is to be true to the request. And so many people are terrified. I don't want to be that vulnerable. I don't want to let people know that I have needs to be met. I don't want to appear needy. And yet the total interdependence of relationships is actually, we all have needs that need to be met. And there is no shame in that. And actually, if we didn't have needs that needed to be met, then we wouldn't need each other. There would be no need for connection.
Yeah.
It would be isolation. So it's letting go of the shame of having needs, and letting go of and accepting that everybody has the right to accept or reject your request, but it's your responsibility to advocate for your needs to be met.
Yeah. This is why I love that. And this is why another thing I've noticed is the power of when someone's pain is validated or witnessed, when they do choose to be vulnerable, and there is a space in which that can be shared, whether that's with a therapist, a coach, a friend or someone who's like a mentor. I noticed in the group, people, once one person opened up and then another person, then you get this momentum and people feel this sense of relief. And I noticed that what that does is it helps to vents off some of that pain, and it creates a space within the mind now that, and there's a window of opportunity, because you can fall back in your habits, but there's a window of opportunity. It creates space where you can choose to fill that space with some beauty, and some, fill it up with some of your dreams. What do you really want? What would life be like if I was meeting this need and it felt really good to me? What could that possibly look like? And get into the visualization. So this kind of makes me want to transition into how this plays into manifestation, because a lot of people in the spiritual communities are talk about manifestation and creating your dreams. But if you don't have the ability to resolve conflict within yourself, then what you're manifesting is more evidence that you have the inability to resolve conflict within yourself, and it mirrors that frustration you have with the self, and that becomes your reality. So this is really deeply fundamental. It's as important as your needs are, this work, right? To really open up and have that space where you can be vulnerable. Now, I know you offer a coaching container that does that. I've been doing it through Mastermind and through some group things. What would be, first of all, how would you like to weigh in on how you've seen that affect your ability to manifest, to be all spiritual,
Okay.
and a little bit about your process that you find yourself taking other women through?
Okay. Well, on the manifestation part, we've heard the saying, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And I grew up with a lot of poverty, right? And I remember looking at my life as a child and being like, why do we have to be so poor? Why does there have to be so much chaos? Why does it have to be so much like this? And as I've come to realize, poor relationships, poor health, poor financial ability, financial settings all come from poor emotional states, poor vibrations. Everything is an energy that we emit. And so it's like Viktor Frankl says, we have the opportunity in any devastating, which he's gone through, any situation, to choose our vibration. That's a choice. And not choosing your vibration is also a choice, meaning I'm surrendering to take responsibility for the energy that I am emitting at this moment and allowing my default mode to run this part of my life. And if my default mode is poor thinking, poor feeling, I'm stuck in guilt, shame, sadness, apathy, grief, or jealousy and desire or anger and all of that, then of course, that is now the filter in which I perceive the entire world. And I have had this kind of big range where there were moments where it was crystal clear. That was so crystal clear that the only thing that I needed to do is to be very clear and coherent about the energy that I am choosing to emit. And that changes the filter of my perception. And that now signals the brain to find evidence of all of those things. So if my intent is to emanate, let's just say joy or peace. And as I'm going and I say, I am committed to being at peace. I'm committed to being at peace. I am now looking for peace in my environment. What a beautiful thing. What a beautiful this. And I am now, because everything is all around us at all times. There's poverty and there's wealth right here, right now.
Yeah.
But based on the filter of the low vibe, that's what we see. Or based on the high vibe, it's what we see. And here's the funny thing. In the low vibration, it's like you have this, your vision narrows and you cannot see. So it's like, wow, the more I actually set a clear, coherent intention that I am not going to give my power of the energy that I wish to exude and emit and radiate, and knowing that that is magnetic and all things that are in a like to that must show up. It's a must. So, and it can be frustrating when you're stuck in the muck and you're like, man, it's just more stuck in the muck. It's just more stuck in the muck. And it just becomes a self-fulfilling. Right. It's like a reinforcing thing. And it's like, wow. But the only thing that for me that I have ever done that has really is like in the instant, your energy can be transformed. In this moment, you can choose. I'm not saying that it's always that easy, especially if you're really wired to be a certain way. And I'm taking full responsibility. I was really wired to be stuck in guilt and shame. But once I realized, like, wow, the only true power I have is to take responsibility for the energy that I'm bringing to my experience, then manifestation of the things that I want. I mean, it just shows up. And it's such a joy because it's a match for the joy of the energy. Or, oh, this guilt that I'm feeling, oh, now I'm experiencing this punishment and finger pointing and blaming, And it's like everything is my teacher reminding me of what energy I'm emitting. So it's a lot of responsibility, very Spider-Man, great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's like, I am taking my power back and taking responsibility for the energy that I bring, knowing that the external world will be what I see based on the filter of my vibration.
Yeah, it's great. And it's funny how even our, as above, so below. So it's very practical. Even if you're not a person who's open to much of the esoteric, spiritual sciences, and you're even if you're a pure materialist, you can look at it in terms of like, well, there's opportunity around you at all times, and if you can learn to tune your reticular activating system, which is a primal part of your brain, you will. It's just like we've all had the experience when, if you have an event plus an emotion, you see reminders of it everywhere. So like, say you go buy a new car and you're really excited about it. You're like, oh my God, I got this car, you get it. Or even you're researching it and you have a lot of heightened emotions. You're going to notice you just start seeing that damn thing everywhere. You're like, man, everybody done got that car, And
Yeah.
That's the reticular activating system at play. They're likely there all along, but if you're not focused on it, they don't register in your consciousness, become aware they're a background thing. You're focused on, so if you're focused on what you don't want, all you see is what you don't want. If you focus on what you do want, you start to see more of what you do want. And then how I've noticed that how the universe works, so to speak, is that it will open doors, but it won't push you through them. So thus that's the opportunity. So once you see a door's open, every little decision is going to take that's actually a conflict. You're going to feel conflicted with where you are now. It's a past versus future conflict that you have to bring into the present and then step through that new door. Like to do that. I just did one today, if I can share. I just invested in a wealth coach through my mentor, one of his coaches, and it's not cheap. And I made a decision that this is an area of my life where I could use much more improvement, and I'll step into someone else's container. And as soon as I made that decision, I ran my numbers. I'm like, I don't actually have this to do that. And then I remembered something because I made that decision. I remembered someone who had owed me, and I sent a text and just got a couple $1,000 Zelled to me right before we got on the call here today. That now facilitated that decision. But I made the decision first, and then I didn't know how it would be, fulfilled. And technically I had every reason to just make an excuse and say this isn't possible because I had the scientific evidence in front of me that I don't have enough. Right. But by choosing to surrender, that's when you have those moments where, and it really came down to me choosing to send that text. So I had to deal with the conflict of past self, don't have what I need to do this, future self, I have desire for it, and getting that to come present into a dance together, make a decision that's an act of faith. Those two things come together to make a third. And that third is that window. It's like, I call them portals of beauty. Like whenever you take things that seem to be opposite of each other, you don't judge either and you squish them together, right? If you're, on one side of a political aisle, go study the other side. If you believe one thing about climate change, go look at the opposite. And you see that there's no extreme possesses all the truth. You really need to overlay them together to start to arrive at more of a grounded approach to your life. So, really good stuff. We have about 10 minutes or so left. And I want to give you the opportunity to lay out, if someone was to do coaching with you, and I know you particularly like to work with women,
right?
What would that look like? Like, what would be their first, like, what was the first, like, what would it look like? And what would be your big promise to them if they chose to really engage?
Well, the promise is that I'll get them what they want. And then I'm just there to remove anything that's delusional, that's blocking them from getting what they want. And I haven't had a problem doing that at all. And that's been so rewarding. So kind of on what you were saying about hiring a wealth coach, same thing. When you pay attention. And I'm going to say, like, I have this wealth of knowledge, but if somebody doesn't pay for it and just wants to kind of pick at me, they don't get the value that the person who invested. And how I work with people is very specific. I work with women on a 12-week cycle, because any transformation, I don't care if it's your body, it's your wealth, it's your relationships, you need a full season to rewire yourself. And I work with people twice a week. So it's 24 sessions, and we get very crystal clear before even session 1. What is it? Where is it that you're wanting to go? What's tripping you up? And then we start the 12 weeks. And in the 12 weeks, I work with you every 3 days, or 3.5 days technically. And there's a specific reason for that, because anything, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, when you put your energy into it, you can miss 1 day, you can miss 2 days, but once you miss 3 days of practicing and applying, that those neural pathways start to diminish, or those muscles, if it's physical training, start to diminish. We start to see a regression. So my intent in working with women is I'm going to hold your hand for 12 weeks so you cannot get off track. And I'm going to bring you on back, and here we go. Oh, you started to forget. You started to go back into this. You're blind to yourself. You're so familiar with how you are that you don't even recognize it. So I am the one that's like, here we go. Oh, this is interesting. And so that by the end of it, they are so crystal clear and they're so self-aware. And I have them do a series of self-awareness tests. We do 12 of them through the process. And it's like, oh, now I completely understand why this is happening. And so it's a fusion. I'm not going to say that it's like pure therapy or pure coaching. It's a fusion of past, future, and brought into the present moment to release that and experience that. And I am shocked by just over and over and over. And it's like, wow, they really get what they want. And it actually really even inspires me just to see that because we all have blind spots, right? So you hiring a coach is fantastic because you're familiar with you. Whenever you hire somebody, they see you with a completely clear lens that you're oblivious to, because, it's like, does a fish know it's swimming in water? That's all it's ever known. So you don't know it. So that's what I do.
I think that's a really good point. That also ties back to that concept of having your pain validated, and also solutions validated. Sometimes like the dreams that you have in your mind validated. And, because there's when you're dealing with a wound like that, you're still a little kid looking for someone to give you permission, and you're really learning how to give that to yourself.
Right.
Right. But a good coach, whatever, is going to be interested in making that transition with you, where they're not going to no, you're going to grow up in this area, and I'm going to affirm what your mama, daddy didn't, or whatever, no one did, but we're about to do that work now. And we're going to spend 12 weeks rewiring your brain, your reticular activating system, your life, and then just watch what the hell shows up. All that's automatic, right? But that journey is difficult for people because we have to learn to have a positive relationship with tension. This is another thing that came up the other night at the event, was that it's really important, and you said it a moment ago, that if you realize there's an area of your life where you don't know how to do, or you're not getting the results you want, I use like an analogy in my group a lot. I'll say, I said, listen, the best way to understand it, it's like, imagine you're a kid and no one taught you how to tie your shoes. And so you go around, running around the playground, and you're tripping all the time. And you're crying because you have your bruised elbows. You have all these things that happen to you, broken bones, all this stuff, all because you're trying to run through life and you're always tripping, hitting your head, all sorts of stuff. And people around you might laugh because you don't know how to trip and think you should. So you feel shame around it. So now you really, really feel it until you grow up. You find other people and meet them who can't tie their shoes. So you get in relationships with them because now you feel like you can have someone who understands you. And then next thing you know, you have groups or institutions or people that all don't tie their shoes, and they form community and find bonding around trauma. And there's some, that's still trying to, it's a strategy for meeting a need. And the funny thing is, if you were to go to those people and say, awesome, you found community, you found connection. Now, would you like to have power in that area of your life so you don't hurt yourself and learn to tie your shoes? Most people would resist the notion, because the change of learning how to tie your shoes means that you're going to feel like you're ostracized from the community and no longer fit in with that community who can't tie their shoes. Right?
You said, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So it really is that simple. So you're seeking wisdom. So if I say, look, my financial, like I've done okay in certain areas, I've done amazing in certain areas, but there's certain areas where, if I'm being honest with myself, I'm not great at tying my shoes, and it's a time for, it's not like you have to get over like healing the trauma and all this kind of stuff. And it's just, look, enough to know that you need to learn how to tie your shoes. So go through that refiner's fire and develop self-mastery in that area. And then that's going to be the thing that helps you get the results and manifest more.
I wanted to speak to this is something that I experience even with the clients that I have. They're like, wow, I am leveling up. And there's this fear of like, will I have to leave my husband? Will I have to leave, and there's this fear that comes up because there is this innate thing where it's like a need for belonging. And one of the things that I'll often share is you belong in your body. You belong here. You're safe here. Hopefully you're safe here, or if you're not, we're going to work on making you safe here, safe in your life. You belong in this body, in this mind, in this life. And then when you feel that way, there's always people that resonate. But yeah, we do listen, are we all still friends with our, preschool friends? Like maybe one, but relationships, as we evolve, they evolve. And I think sometimes we have this perception that relationships are supposed to, always be there. And if they aren't, or if they change directions, that means that there's something wrong or bad. And it's not necessarily so, but I understand that people will do anything to feel a sense like I have a family, I belong, and in evolving might threaten my belonging. And if you think about it on a very primal level, the first 7 years of your life, you don't have the ability to have analytical thoughts for yourself so that you are programmed to belong, so you get along with the family unit. So it's like this sense of belonging is essential for your survival. And that's why that works that way. So it's understand like how it's like, oh, you mean change? Then where do I belong? And that's why I say, I'll come back to you belong here. You belong here. You belong in your body. You belong in this life.
You were just talked out of being secure with that, or through some experiences at a time of your life where you didn't have a choice, but now you do. And so it's about making that choice. And I often remind myself and others when I'm coaching is that, look, the price of peace is courage. Because if you look at the emotional expansion chart, you introduced me to that, to David Hawkins' his work. And I've referred to that so many times, but when you have contracted emotions of fear, shame, guilt, in order to expand, you're going to go through a lot of things. You're going to feel anger. You're going to feel, you might feel grief. You're going to hit a level of pride and starting to feel some stride. And you're going to rise to a level of courage. And that's really where that conflict resolution layer is in my mind, because it becomes a flipping point into neutrality or a sense of like secure. And then from there, what's even beautiful is there's more icing to add to the cake, which is love, joy, and peace, enlightenment, those kind of things. But you can't bypass that process. There's no getting around that.
And one thing I say is, like, all these emotions that we're talking about in the power versus force is they're keys on a piano, and we're meant to have this emotional range, but we want to tune the piano so we're attuned to these emotions and what they're trying to communicate to us, because they're just a feedback mechanism. And once you understand that, it's like, no, don't, like, if you felt shame, it's when it's chronically stuck in one, where it's like, okay, what's going on here? But it's to attune and be like, all emotions are safe and all are good, and all is just a different note that's communicating to you, so that it's a feedback system for yourself. So it's nothing to fear, nothing to avoid, nothing to judge. It's merely a gift for you to just to navigate your life experiences. So, I mean, when I feel shame, when I feel guilt, when I feel all those, like, it's natural. It's natural to feel those. Is it natural to stay there for years? No. Is it natural to feel it for about 90 seconds? Yeah. And it's a healthy, like, I did something out of integrity. I needed to see this in myself. I need to apologize. I'm human. I make mistakes, So I appreciate the shame. I appreciate the guilt. I appreciate it all. It's there as a feedback to let me know, am I in alignment with myself?
Yeah. And, and I have a lot of, compassion for the process. I recently watched I'll share this real quick. I watched a really interesting film. It's on Hulu, I believe, and it's called A Dangerous Method, I think it's called. And it's a true story about the relationship and friendship of Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
And Freud was, just to kind of give the recap, Freud was very material-based, science-based. So his community, his RAS, his reticular activating system, his psychology was oriented towards the material, which there's obviously lots of evidence and truth and validity in. And Carl Jung was that, plus he was very interested in the esoteric or the inner world, and he was all interested in exploring the shadow and the darker sides of humanity. And what was interesting was that he ended up having a falling out with Freud over that. There's a friction that was there, and he went through a nervous breakdown himself. And a lot of that was because he was having a break with society and his way of, you can watch the film to see how he dealt with it, but and the lover that was involved, that was really interesting. He had a mistress and a wife, and it was all in the open, but it was because he was dealing with that darkness, and at that time it was so much that stuff was so repressed. So often when we have this, I think, a doom imprint around bringing up things that are that societally don't feel safe to do, which is just why it's so important to find a coach or a community or space where you feel that can actually be done in a way where you can navigate that process. Because once you get to the other side of it, you'll be so empowered you won't even care anyway, right? But that hero's journey in the abyss you go through, and a little bit of that fear, depending on how severe it is, it needs a steady hand in your life for like that 12-week period is a magic period. So with that, if someone was interested in learning more about you or working with you, what does a step one look like? What would be their step one? Where could they go, and what would that be?
They could go to my website, lifebylori.com, and it's LORI, lifebylori.com. And you can just send an email. I'm on Instagram, and I believe, or actually even on my website, if it says work with me, there's a link where you can request a complimentary evaluation, where we just get to hear what is it that you're needing? What is it that you're wanting? What are you struggling with? And is this a good match? Is there something that I can really contribute and help you get these results? Or, and do we vibe, So that's just something that I offer anybody. They fill out an intake form, and we just communicate for about 30 minutes. And if they want to go further and deeper, I don't do just one session one, hearing it there. If they've already gone through a 12-week session with me, then of course, if they have any one little tweak here and there, if they need that, that's fine. But I don't work with anybody other than that. And what I realized is I'm not serving people at the highest level. I used to do one-on-one, and I started to feel like they were frustrated. They weren't getting the result. I was frustrated because I knew what I was delivering to them. And I knew that I needed to change my entire system because I want them to succeed. And just showing up for them once is not enough support to succeed. So that's why I changed my model. So that's what they would do. They'd go on lifebylori.com. They could follow me on Instagram. And I also have like a little link on there on my bio where it says book a free consultation. And on Instagram, it's Lori Painter. So they can find me there. And, you could even message me on any of those from my website or from Instagram. That would be great, and start the process.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. I think we can do, I'd be down to do some more of these. I'm sure there's other topics out there we could address. And I want to thank you guys for watching today. And if you found value in this, if you want to learn more about Lori, just visit the link. I'll pop a link here, and then we'll put one in the description as well. And of course, if you like this video, found value, go hit that thumbs up button, deal with that internal conflict, resolve it, and go push that button, and help other people to, discover this content. You laughing at me over there, Lori?
You're cute.
So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. And I just want to say, I appreciate you. I'm grateful that we had our time together and still do in our own different ways. And I think that's something I would love more people to experience, is the fact that just because a relationship changes doesn't mean it has to end.
Right. There's always a genius in every relationship. If you can learn to find that sweet spot, it's just a matter of transmuting it to a way that's serving both of you at the best.
Very cool. All right. Well, with that, we'll close it out, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.